Welcome to the Your Webinar Outline lesson. In this lesson, we're going to cover how to pick a webinar topic and craft a webinar training on it that'll successfully sell your offer. Before we discuss how to pick your webinar topic, we need to first discuss the blueprint that you're going to use for your webinar, as this will inform every other aspect of it. There are 3 tried and true webinar blueprints, and they are: first, the set number, usually 3 to 5, of elements or secrets or keys or strategies that comprise your solution. The purpose of this blueprint is to allow you to address the most common misconceptions, ideas, or knowledge that your audience needs to have addressed before they'll be ready to buy. For example, if I were to create a webinar for the Employee to Entrepreneur course using this blueprint, I might talk about the top 3 myths that hold aspiring entrepreneurs back. The first myth might be that you need to spend years first building your email list before you can get clients. After addressing that myth, I would then share the truth about how to get your first clients without having to do that, so that my viewers who've been discouraged by that myth know that that doesn't need to hold them back anymore. As you can see from this example, what this blueprint does is it allows you to address the top objections that your audience might have about whether or not they can achieve the solution your offer promises, while showing how much easier, faster, cheaper your strategy is, which transitions beautifully into sharing your offer. The second proven blueprint you can use is to share the high-level strategy of the process that you teach or help with through your work. This way, your viewer can understand how working with you will make their desired results happen for them by giving them the step-by-steps behind that strategy. For example, if you help entrepreneurs with managing Facebook ads, your free training could share an overview of the basic principles of running effective Facebook ads. Then the transition into your offer would be, if you want help with the details of all of this, such as how to target the correct audience and set up your campaigns and optimize them, I can help you with that. And finally, your third option is to share a small portion of your paid offer as the free training, and after your viewers are hooked and want the rest of the offer to get the full solution, you let them know that they can get it as a part of your course. For example, if your offer is a coaching program that helps someone lose their first 20 pounds, your webinar training might cover the 3 steps to lose your first 5 pounds via easy wins. Then the transition would naturally be, if you love these steps and want to continue your weight loss, here's how I can help you lose your first 20 pounds. I recommend that you start with either the first or second blueprint, as they are much easier to implement effectively. Once you've decided on your blueprint, it's time to pick your webinar topic. To do that, use these 3 questions to help you brainstorm. Are there certain topics or questions that you repeatedly get asked about? If so, these are the topics that are top of mind for your audience and will most likely not only drive the most signups, but also be the most effective at addressing what they need to hear before they'll be ready to buy your offer. If you can't think of any questions, then if you've been creating content for your audience in terms of your social media posts or emails or blog posts, are there certain topics that get the most engagement from your audience? That will answer the same question. And finally, what does your audience need to know about your topic and or your offer specifically before they'll be ready to buy from you? Now that you have your webinar blueprint and topic, you need to come up with an effective name for your webinar. This is the single most powerful element that will affect whether or not people sign up for your webinar, so make sure you take some time to think this through. 2 of the most common and effective frameworks for naming your webinar are how to whatever you're teaching, or X steps, elements, etc. to. As you're brainstorming your webinar title, make sure that it's actionable, because remember that people want transformation, not information. Also, make sure that it's specific, as we already discussed in the previous lesson. And finally, make sure that it feels tangible, that your viewer feels like they're going to walk away with a plan or a strategy versus just some random information. Don't stress about creating a clever name, as most of the time, the best performing names are the most straightforward ones. You don't want anyone to be confused about what they're signing up for. Now let's cover the 5 parts of your webinar content. The webinar outline implementation guide in this section will walk you through a slide-by-slide breakout of your outline that'll give you even more detail, so don't worry about that. Focus right now on making sure you understand the principles and goals behind each part of the webinar first. The beginning of your webinar is all about your webinar hook. These first few minutes are critical because they set the tone for the rest of your webinar and play a key role in how long your viewer is going to stay on for the training. To properly set the stage and engage your audience from the very beginning, your hook has to do a few things. Grab your viewers' attention by being interesting and relevant to them. Let your audience know that they're going to get a lot of value out of your training. Reassure them that this training is for them and that they won't be wasting their time. And finally, give your viewer a reason to pay attention and to stay on for the entire training by either promising a bonus gift or offer at the end, or simply sharing how valuable the training will be. After quote-unquote hooking your viewer into your webinar, you need to give him or her a reason to believe in you. It could very well be that some of your viewers are hearing from you for the first time or don't know why they should believe in you. The thing to remember about this part is that even though it's your introduction, it's not really about you. It's about your audience and what they need to hear to find you relatable and credible. The easiest way to do that is to share the portion of your story or your brand story that is relevant to your offer. This is similar to the story you crafted following the Work With Me page formula earlier in this course, and there are a few things you need to show. You need to show that you started where they are so they know you relate to where they are now. You need to show that you are now where they want to be and or that you've helped others get to where they want to be, which implies that you can help them as well. And finally, you need to show that the reason you or your clients have been able to make that transformation is not because you or your clients are so special or different, but because you have a system. This is your hook, which is also going to be the big idea behind your webinar, like we discussed in the previous lesson. Notice that this is all you're sharing. You're not sharing your life story or any more information than your viewer needs to hear. Your big idea for your webinar provides the perfect transition into the training portion of your webinar. This is where you share your actual training that supports your big idea. As you're working on this part of your webinar, remember that, as we discussed in the previous lesson, the point of your webinar is not to teach, it's to sell. So while what you're sharing does need to be valuable and some of your best content, don't go into so much detail that it feels overwhelming or that it makes your viewer feel like they don't need your paid offer. That would completely defeat the purpose of your webinar. Also, if you have enough testimonials, disperse them through your training and use them to emphasize the effectiveness of each of your points or strategies. And finally, during this part of your webinar, set the stage for making your paid offer pitch by pre-seeding for your offer. This is something that a lot of new webinar presenters miss. Throughout your free training, mention your offer that's coming up at the end of the webinar so that your viewers are prepared for it and primed to buy instead of being completely surprised and unprepared. This can be as simple as mentioning something like, "Would you like more detail about this topic? I'll be sharing with you in just a little bit more how I can help you do this." One point is so important that I need to emphasize it one more time. Do not overteach on your webinar. An easy way to think about it that will help you decide what to include in your training and what to leave out is the what versus how rule. Your webinar training should teach the what. In other words, the high-level strategy of how you're going to help the viewer get the results they want so they can see how possible it is, but don't know the details. Your offer is the solution that then helps them with the how of getting that result. If you're teaching the how in your webinar, you're over-teaching. The next part of the webinar is one of the most important parts, your transition from your training into your pitch. This needs to be natural and seamless so that it makes complete sense that you've moved from the training into the pitch and so that you minimize viewer drop-off at this point. As a side note, people will drop off at this point no matter how good you are with your transition, and that's normal, so don't be discouraged. The transition that's most effective for this type of webinar is the you have a choice. Continue doing what you've been doing and continue getting the same lack of results you've been getting, or get my help and finally solve this problem transition. And finally, after your transition, it's time for your actual pitch. For this type of webinar, where you're selling a premium coaching, consulting, or freelancing offer, your webinar only has to sell the sales call with you, not the actual offer itself. This means that you don't need to introduce your offer. All you have to do is sell the call. You do that by sharing what they'll walk away from the call with, which is a step-by-step plan for how your process will be customized for them. If you remember the sales call framework we went through earlier in this module, that's exactly what you do through your sales call conversation, so this is in complete integrity. You can also mention that if you feel you can help them further, you might also share how you'll be able to work with them to get the best results. After offering the free call, you need to let your viewer know exactly what to do to schedule a call with you. This includes showing them the link to go to, the button they need to click, how to schedule a free call with you, and what to expect after all of that is done. This might seem simple, but it can make a huge difference in your webinar conversion rate. Before we wrap up this lesson, let's cover a few best practices for your webinar. First, don't just read from your slides. Keep it interesting and speak to your audience as if you were having an actual conversation. Stay on each slide for only 1 to 2 minutes so that you're continually switching up the slides and providing viewers with visual stimulation. Remember, people have short attention spans. Practice your webinar at least 2 to 3 times before actually running it live for the first time. This will give you a chance to iron out the kinks and get comfortable with your material. Continue to improve on one training until you are meeting or exceeding all the webinar benchmarks we went over earlier in this lesson. The most important thing is to sound like yourself and let your way of speech, personality, etc. come through. You don't have to perfectly follow the slide-by-slide outline in the implementation guide because remember, there's no one right way to do anything. This is simply an outline to help you get started. Feel free to experiment and test what works for you. And finally, don't give up if you don't get it perfect on the first try. Keep on testing until it clicks. It took me over 10 attempts before I made my first sale on a webinar. Webinars are an incredibly powerful online marketing technique, so don't give up and don't assume they won't work for you because they will. We covered a lot in this lesson. We discussed how to come up with your webinar topic, name, and blueprint so that it's positioned to sell, and the outline to follow for your webinar. Your next steps are to complete the Your Webinar Outline, Funnel, and Setup implementation guides. After that, it's time to move on to Module 5, Scaling, where we'll talk about how to scale your business and use the webinar you've just created to get more customers.